Rape can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. Around the world, survivors of sexual assault and supporters of the victims are demanding justice, taking to the streets and social media to say no means no and to hold perpetrators to account. But why do rape and sexual violence still happen every day in nearly every country on earth? This week, we're taking an in-depth look at rape culture. What does it look like? Who and what enables it? We'll also speak to survivors who are tackling a culture of rape in their own countries. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Heidi Adams-Fitzpatrick. Before we begin, we'd like to inform you that some of the stories in our broadcast contain themes or subjects that are not appropriate for children or sensitive viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. It's a case that sparked outrage and protest in Sierra Leone, where rape is a topic of national conversation these days, not only because the president of that country declared rape a national emergency last year, but because of what happened in June to a 5-year-old girl. She was left in the care of a family member who raped and killed her. Salem Solomon brings us the story.
5-year-old Khadija Soko was raped and killed by a family member who was supposed to be looking after her and her sister in Sierra Leone. Protests followed, and the ongoing debate about how to handle the rape crisis continues as policymakers grapple with ideas on how to address gender-based violence against women and girls. Khadija's father said he believes sexual abuse of minors is permitted and rarely punished in the country.
My daughter's story is very, very sad because in my country, rape have become, acceptable in family setting.
President Julius Maada last year declared rape and sexual violence a national emergency. At the time, the country had more than 8,500 reported cases of sexual and gender-based violence per year.
These despicable crimes of sexual violence are being committed against our own women, children, and even babies. Some of the fatalities are as young as 3 months old. 70% of the survivors of this traumatic experience are under the age 15.
Since then, the country has made strides, including strengthening its Sexual Offences Act to allow for a maximum punishment of life in prison for someone who rapes a child. It also created a Sexual Offences Division of the High Court to make sure sexual assault cases are prosecuted swiftly. Still, advocates say the problem persists.
One of the reasons why I think the numbers have not come down is because, quite honestly, numbers came up because more people were confident coming out to complain. But the numbers have not increased insofar as successful prosecutions as against the number of claims that are being made.
But lawyers representing clients who have suffered gender-based violence, also known as GBV, say that the call center for victims should deal with other forms of violence against girls and women, like domestic abuse, in order to address deeper societal issues. In March, the country made progress by overturning a ban on pregnant girls attending school or sitting for exams.
Because we thought that it was a very discriminatory measure. Obviously, there was like girls that they became pregnant and they were punished. They were sent out of a school, while the boys, the men that they got them impregnated, they carry on with their normal lives. When we have been arguing with the government for all these years, they decided that pregnant girls are not fitted, they are not mentally and physically capable of going to school when they are pregnant. They also decided that pregnant girls are really a bad example for other girls, and that's why they have to put them away.
In the midst of his anguish and grief, Khadija's father wants to make sure the person who is responsible is prosecuted. Salem Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
A prominent Sierra Leonean gender activist says it was her own experience of being raped as a child that helped her understand that sexual assault is about power and control. During a visit to Washington, Naasu Fofanah told me how America's Me Too movement at times re-traumatized her, and why she says now is the best time for the women in her country to speak out and hold the powerful to account.
The two people who raped me were people of power. So my religious leader and an uncle who was seen as, almost like a god-like figure in my family. And because I was powerless, I could not speak about these issues. So you obviously continue to suffer. It would have been my fault. People say to me, why didn't you tell your mother? Nobody was going to, first of all, believe me that any of these people, had done wrong. It was my fault as a child to have allowed me to be raped. There are people who would say, you're lucky that he, in fact, wants to sleep with you. Yes, and to date, that practice continues with people of power. So as a survivor, I think, every woman's experience is personal. And then 2017, I had an opportunity to come and do a course at NYU. And then I get here and there's this whole Me Too movement. So I'm like, oh no, I thought I was running away from this at home, and then now I'm here, the television, every day you wake up, it's this, it's this talk, there's one woman coming after one woman after one.
The charges will not be believed by 12 people, assuming.
And it just felt really I felt emotionally insecure. I almost felt like I didn't want to watch the television, I didn't want to hear, because there was so much recall, like relieving. So seeing this on, this global platform and people speaking, you're thinking, actually, it's okay to talk about this. Don't just keep putting your head under the pillow. It's fine. You can talk about it. What I like about the movement is the global voice that it has given to more women. And I think that has helped some of us to be a lot more braver. I remember somebody was saying in Sierra Leone, we should have a Me Too movement. I don't think, because our context is very different and it's very, very difficult. We don't have the opportunities of having counseling, of having support when women speak. We don't have women who have financial freedom to be able to take lawyers. We don't have the judicial system to vindicate women. What we have is a culture full of impunity, full of powerful men who could break women. We have limitations in our context which wouldn't afford the Me Too kind of movement.
So when the president of your country made this announcement that rape would now be declared a national emergency in Sierra Leone, what did that moment mean to you?
So it was really good when this came out, and I went on social media and said, thank you, Mr. President. I'm really, really pleased that you have made it a national issue. Having said that, we can speak all we want to speak. If we don't put the structures in place to actually implement the laws that we're talking about, then it becomes useless. The other thing is we need to be able to have survivors' voices. Naasu really is that you might not really. I am currently doing my 50th speaker series. Girls and women. For me, my healing is actually taking my story as a preventative platform into schools. We need to prevent these children from getting into the situation that I got into. We need to let them know that now, there are laws they can report. Sometimes have sleepless nights about this. How are we going to have more women in politics? How are we going to have women leaders when our girls cannot finish secondary education because somebody has decided to violate them and get them pregnant? I have found so much support by working with these young people. I have not paid much attention to the adults who didn't believe my story when I eventually broke it out on social media, because I have a constituency who I care about, and they believe my story and they trust me.
And that was Sierra Leonean author and gender activist Naasu Fofanah speaking to me in Washington. Now, we're going to talk about the Me Too movement some more. After the break, we'll look at whether reporting rape and sexual assault online is really effective. And we want you to get in on the conversation. Find us on social media. Our handle is at VOA Our Voices. Tell us whether you think sharing experiences with sexual violence on social media is an effective way to bring perpetrators to book and achieve social justice. We're going to talk about all of that after the break. Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. Two words first used by American activist Tarana Burke in 2006 to stand with survivors of sexual abuse: Me Too. It inspired a grassroots global movement and a viral hashtag online as countless survivors, including celebrities, spoke out about their experiences and in many cases named their abusers. Today, there are questions about whether the movement has been effective for survivors in other communities and countries, those who are not powerful, wealthy, or famous. And that's what we're going to focus on now. In Egypt, social media is exploding with voices echoing the Me Too movement following the arrest of Ahmed Bassam Zaki, accused of either raping or harassing as many as 100 women and girls. His arrest came after a barrage of Instagram posts making accusations against him.
It started with an Instagram account named for its social media advocacy for women, Assault Police, which picked up 164,000 followers in less than 2 weeks. On it, about 100 women and girls claimed to have been harassed, sexually assaulted, or raped by Ahmed Bassam Zaki, a former student at the prestigious American University in Cairo.
Most women are usually afraid to tell anyone. You don't know if you tell your family if you will be supported or not. Or you may be beaten or touched again by the man who assaulted you.
Egypt has long struggled with the problem of sexual harassment. A United Nations study found that nearly all Egyptian women say at some point they have been victims of some form of it. But the Zaki case has proven to be different. After the women and girls spoke up, the man was arrested, and prosecutors say he will be held as 6 alleged cases are investigated. Zaki's family has been mostly silent, but they did tell NBC News the charges are false and that this is an internet pile-on. But more social media accounts keep popping up, with users posting accusations against other alleged sexual abusers in what some commentators are calling Egypt's Me Too movement.
What's important is that this proves social media can have a very big role if people participate. The reaction was swift. In 48 hours, they captured the accused.
Since the arrest, Egyptian lawmakers have adopted a bill that says victims' names must be withheld from public documents to protect them from threats after they make an accusation. This will encourage more victims to come forward, but there is a lot more to do, say lawyers.
There should be an independent department in a judiciary that only takes cases related to violence against women, and it should not only deal with rapes, but with other violence and harassment, including between married couples.
Prosecutors say Zaki has confessed to blackmailing women and girls, but at the same time denies all other charges. Heather Murdoch, VOA News in Istanbul, with Hamada Al-Rassam in Cairo.
Now, as we can see there, online activism can be a powerful tool to help rape survivors speak out and demand justice. But one Kenyan activist says much of the problem lies in the way women and men view one crucial concept: consent. I met with her in Kenya, where she's working to change minds and attitudes about sexual assault. I first read about Nafula Wafula online, where she had started a petition calling for an end to a culture of rape in Kenyan sport. She was bringing attention to an incident that had unleashed a social media firestorm in her country. On Instagram, Wendy Kimunto, an up-and-coming musician, accused 2 national rugby players of gang raping her in 2018.
The first count of gang rape,
Alex Ulaba and Frank Wanyama were convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison last year, sentences that have since been overturned on a technicality. Both men are now free, pending a retrial. In Nairobi, Wafula tells me whatever the outcome, rape trials include complicated questions.
I don't know, man. The thing about cases or gender-based violence, imprisonment, stuff like that, is at the end of the day there's really no real winner. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of issues like to discuss and think about as to whether prison is really the end, of the conversation. Is that really the victory, or is rehabilitation, the victory that we should be talking about?
Wafula, who is a survivor of sexual assault, says part of what's needed is an open, honest conversation with men. She met with a group of Kenyan rugby players at their request to educate them about sexual assault and consent.
What do they want to know? What is it that sometimes we as women wonder, what is it that men don't get about this? What are men thinking?
Yeah, I think, interestingly enough, this was conversations around what does consent really mean? What if she says yes and then she says, in the middle? Or it was very general, everyday conversations.
Actually practical.
Exactly, very practical. We talked about how me as a girl, I'm brought up to put my legs together, sit with my legs together, and be home at a particular time and be a virgin, And boys are not taught that. Boys are taught to sit with their legs apart, and that's their male expression, and be sexually aggressive. For example, the stereotype that if a girl says no, you just need to keep pushing, a little, because she's going to say, no, I don't want. And then if you keep, if she says yes at first, if she says yes very fast, then she's easy. Yeah. So if a guy keeps pushing and keeps pushing and keeps pushing, and she keeps saying no, and then eventually says, okay, fine, I did it, but I thought she was going to say yes eventually. Technically, yes, that is sexual assault. No, technically it is. She didn't give her consent.
Wafula says rape culture is partly rooted in fear and shame instilled in women at an early age.
So, for example, in Kenyan culture, your private area is called, in Swahili, tabia mbaya, which means bad manners. Yeah. So, and sex is bad manners. And that's what we bring into adulthood, that fear and shame, which I feel is the 2 emotions that every woman, no matter what background they come from, really relate to. It's those 2 things that lock us down. What are people going to say about me,
If I have been sexually assaulted, if I have been raped, what do I do next?
You need to go to a hospital because the trauma is there. And ideally, if you can find someone to go with you, then that would be very helpful. Don't shower. And that's normally, it would be very difficult because all you want to do is shower. Yeah, but don't shower because if you do decide to report, then that's going to be incredibly important for evidence. So don't shower, don't change. And if you have, you can change, but if you have, you can take your innerwear, your panties, and put them in ideally like a brown envelope. Yeah, and take it with you to the hospital, not a nylon bag, because that also messes up with any evidence that might be there. And then after that, I think psychosocial support is incredibly important. Counseling, support groups, seeing someone, therapy is so important, because sometimes we feel like we're okay and maybe you're just operating on autopilot, or so it's incredibly important to seek support. And the other thing is reporting, and reporting is hard. And reporting, I feel, is every survivor's choice. Every survivor should be able to choose whether they want to report or not. But that choice is empowering in itself. Going forward and reporting is not only empowering to the survivor as an individual, but it's empowering to every other woman. It is, because it's an act of protest and standing up for yourself. And in that way, you are speaking for our whole population. It's an act of protest by itself.
And that was Nafula Wafula speaking to me there in Nairobi, Kenya. Still ahead, how young is old enough to learn about rape culture, sexual assault and consent? Well, after the break, we meet a South African woman who says she's figured out a way to help children give a 1-2 punch to sexual assault. We'll speak to her in just a moment. You're with Our Voices. Welcome back. Nigeria's lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19 has seen a spike in reported cases of rape and sexual violence. And the pandemic hasn't stopped thousands of Nigerians from marching on the streets of major cities to demand justice. Timothy Obiezu is in Abuja for us with this report.
In January 2015, Ifunanya Glory was on her way back from work when she says her neighbor lured her into his house. She struggled to break free as he dragged, beat, and eventually raped her.
So we continued the dragging. I think his TV was broken because we dragged. They started blowing me, giving me blow on my legs and everything. And at the end of the day, I couldn't just fight him again. He had his way. I remembered him telling me, Ifunanya, even God cannot save you from my hands. The name of God of Jacob protects me.
Ifunanya's effort to get justice for her rapist was in vain. She comes to this church every week to find solace, but says she still lives with the trauma.
If there's a way I can strangle that guy, I will have if there's a way something I could do to take him out of the earth, I would have done. But there was nothing I could do then, because then I was also financially handicapped.
The United Nations estimates 1 in 4 girls in Nigeria experience sexual violence before the age of 18. But Nigeria is seeing a new wave of rape offenses and sexual violence against women, up to 3 times more since the coronavirus pandemic started, according to a volunteer aid group, the Domestic and Sexual Violence Team. Hundreds of protesters and human rights campaigners who marched around the police headquarters in Abuja demanded justice for victims. On social media, hashtags like End Rape, No Means No, and Justice for Rape Victims continue to trend upward.
The perpetrator also knows that the women and girls are helpless at this time.
Critics say Nigeria has been slow to respond to the problem in the past. But now authorities are deploying special investigative teams on gender violence to each state in the country.
That every one of us have got a sister. We've got a woman in our life. We've got a daughter and we've got a mother. And we will not want any of them to be sexually abused, to be sexually molested, or to be raped.
Last year, Nigerian authorities launched the country's first register of sex offenders to punish perpetrators. More recently, Nigeria Governors Forum declared a state of emergency on rape and other forms of sexual violence against women and children in all 36 states of the country. This gives hope to victims like Ifunanya and activists across Nigeria who demand stricter measures for sex offenders. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja.
Well, moving to South Africa now, a country that has long made headlines for its high rates of rape and sexual assault. Police there say they're recording 116 rape cases every day. Debi Stephen is the founder of Action Break Silence. The organization teaches young people self-awareness, self-defense and communication skills to curb rape and sexual assault. A renowned martial arts instructor, Stephen says preventing sexual violence goes beyond just physical fighting ability.
By the time I was 11 years old,
I had very unfortunately been raped twice. These were just guys in my community, and they were actually my friends' brothers. So with Action Break Silence, we're really trying to get young boys and young girls to have a conversation around gender-based violence. Often self-defense classes consist of a bunch of rules and regulations given to women. Like, if you're a woman, don't walk outside alone. You know, like, that's not very practical for most women. It's just putting such a massive responsibility on us as women that if we follow these 150 rules, then this is going to reduce the chances of us being attacked. Those rules and those regulations wouldn't have helped me. And my parents and every single mother and every single father that I've spoken to, there's not one person that has really educated their girl child that it could be their brother, it could be their father, it could be their uncle, it could be a pastor, it could be somebody that they know. And, you know, and that's something that we're not prepared to discuss because it brings the perpetrators into our inner circle, and that's terrifying for people. We do teach self-defense, but we use the physicality of self-defense as a tool for women to start owning their bodies. It's understanding the reality of who the perpetrators are and having the confidence to respond.
Well, Stephen says we need to communicate differently with children about sexual violence.
When that young boy is pulling your ponytail, you know that that's not okay. Like, it's not okay. And you know when he touches your boob, when he's 7 years old, that's not okay. You know, it's kind of really good communication skills, unfortunately, isn't something that lots of young boys are encouraged to have. So boys start sort of doing things that is risky sexual behavior. And so for us with the boy child and the girl child, is how do we educate them and say, like, this is what sexual harassment looks like. This is the response. This is the hurt. This is the fear. This is what you are almost triggering in these young girls. And as a community, we all agree that these things are not okay, with the girls understanding that they are valued and the young boys equally understanding that they're valued and they have a right for as much happiness and security and able to dream big as anyone else in society.
That is where you become a superhero. You become a superhero when you stand up for what is right.
If I knew what I saw that day, I could also have kicked, you know, my ankles really hard.
And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.